Welcome everyone to the Analytic Mind podcast. Another great episode here for you. Today I am talking with Greg Philps. Now I've known Greg for a little while now as part of the Enterprise DNA community, and Greg has been a big part of the experts group as well, creating some amazing submissions for the Power BI challenge, offering superior support on the Enterprise DNA forum. So there's just so many unique things that we can dive into around Greg's background, I'm sure, but also his knowledge of analytics and Power BI. So I'm really excited to get into this conversation today. So Greg, why don't you give us a little bit of an intro about yourself, so we can all get to know you, and what you're doing a little bit better.
Sure. Very quickly, I guess I did my my schooling in engineering, and I worked as an engineer for 10 years before slowly transitioning into the software industry. And I've been primarily focusing on business analytics and business intelligence for the last, probably 12 years or so. And the last 2 years, almost exclusively on Power BI. My work in the last 12 years pretty much has been for the Canadian government. I've probably worked for 10 different government departments in the last 12 years, doing all kinds of Microsoft-based business intelligence development, be it data warehouses or databases, reporting solutions, Power BI solutions. And I've been trying to bring best of breed knowledge into the government. It's a bit of a challenge. When you're a consultant in a government position, in a government location, you often end up not being granted the opportunity to sit in when people are making the initial decisions. So a lot of times things move a little bit more slowly. But in any event, one of the advantages to being a consultant is bringing best of breed and in trying to bring government staff up to speed. So case in point, the client that I'm with right now, they're using the April 2019 version of Power BI. And I just actually got an email today saying, well, we think we can get another one to you, but it's May 2020. So they're still 6 months out, even on what they're thinking of possibly giving to me. In any event, one of the other challenges that government has is data sharing. The entire concept of the PBI service is foreign to them. They really want to keep all of their data inside their own walls and inside their own walls only. In Canada, every piece of data that's collected is stamped with a protection level, A, B, or C. I can't remember what they all are, but most of the stuff I deal with is protected B, which means it can't go outside the walls of the organization without going through committees and so on. So anyway, long story short, having a gateway to connect a data source from the government to the Power BI service is a non-starter. So we're working through that. But I see that as probably one of the most difficult things for government right now, is that they have to agree to let their data move outside of their walls, even though it is encrypted at rest and in transit on the Power BI service. There's many, many, many companies around the world that are doing it extremely successfully. But anyway, it's a thing.
Yeah, thanks for that, Enrique. There's so much that we can get into there, which I'm quite excited about, especially around some of the challenges that you are facing, like you just mentioned. I think that those are more common than you think, not just at government. So it would be good to be able to dive into those scenarios and maybe how you're looking to tackle them, or if there has been any wins. So definitely I want to jump into those during our discussion. But before we do that, I just want to jump back and so you started off as an engineer, and I want to understand, how did you evolve? Like, how did things evolve into more the business intelligence side, and then how did you end up starting to focus primarily on Power BI? So how did that journey happen? I want to just dig into that a little bit.
Well, to I guess to the start of it started with a company called ChangePoint that was providing professional services automation software package that ran on Lotus Notes, believe it or not. And it was actually very good. And that afforded me the opportunity to move from project management consulting into managing a software development team that was producing a version of ChangePoint for helping companies to transition from a Lotus Notes backend to a SQL Server backend. So that's kind of where I got my start with SQL Server back in 2000, I guess. But the switch over from project management consulting to managing a software development team was afforded me by that company. And that company was growing wildly. I was the 30th employee, and within 5 years I was there, they were up over 400 people. So they were growing explosively. But as life happens, things took a different turn. I ended up moving away from the company before I got my golden handshake. So I ended up doing the work on a consulting basis that I had been managing in the past, and that's kind of where I got my start with analytics. Was I needed to pay the bills, so I did what I could, offered the services to who I could, and because of the experience that I had with databases and so on, I kind of started with SQL Server and went out with everything from there. So I started doing SQL Server integration packages, taught myself that. Started doing data warehousing, taught myself that. Started doing SQL Server reporting services, taught myself that. And that went on swimmingly until probably about 3 years ago, when I was doing an assignment where I was producing a pretty complicated SQL Server reporting services solution. And near the end of that contract, the client said, I wonder if we can use this new tool called Power BI to do exactly the same thing we were doing. So I basically had a good start, a good opportunity to dive in for about 2 months. All of the business rules already for the solution were together, which was great. All of the data for the solution was together, which was great. And I got a chance to see how Power BI could be used to provide, in most cases, better, in some cases not as good. Every solution is different. SQL Server reporting services has some strengths and weaknesses, and Power BI has some strengths and weaknesses. For example, it's challenging to print stuff on paper from Power BI to get all the information, whereas SQL Server reporting services is designed kind of for that. And this was a big part of the solution. And anyway, that kind of got me started with Power BI, and then I moved from that client to other clients, and Power BI became a larger part of my work until it became the only part of my work. So the last 2 contracts that I've had have been pure Power BI. And whatever small amount of database work is necessary to support it. But I've kind of, I can do the database work, but I've pretty much been saying to people, give me the data and so on. I want to help impress upon them that probably getting their data together is probably 75% of their Power BI project. I would love to be doing Power BI all day, but doing Power BI all day with the government is a bit of a challenge, because there's always hoops to go through with the data, who has rights to see what can be released, what's the protocol for it to be approved, and so on. So So yeah, it's basically all my own learning, and I was, during one of my contracts, I was ravenously eating up everything I could find online about Power BI, and it was probably probably a little bit before this time last year, probably the beginning of December, where I found Enterprise DNA, and I just started with doing everything that I possibly could. I got my membership on December 24th last year, so I'm almost at my anniversary. But,
that's great.
Once I found Enterprise DNA, I didn't go anywhere else.
That's great. That's great.
And then I was fortunate enough to be invited to join the expert group in June, and my participation in 3 or 4 different forums, and so on became one forum with that. And I've been focusing solely on the Enterprise DNA forum and community since then.
That's great.
So I think it's been a wild journey. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm really happy to be able to bring some of my engineering background into looking at reporting solutions and really trying to get people to identify exactly what question they're trying to answer. I mean, for example, you will have seen on the submissions that I've had to the Rise DNA challenges that there's not an awful lot of visualizations per page. So I'm really trying to think of exactly what question am I answering with each visual. And it's quite easy and quite fun to produce complicated graphics. But I keep trying to go back to, well, how will I answer the questions being asked? What is the question being asked? What is my top customer? What are my top 3 customers? Now, over this data period, I'm rather than show a huge level of detail, I'd rather just pick out 1 or 2 things. And using the smart narratives and so on has become a huge thing for me and stuff. Because again, I'm looking at that as the answer to a question.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I want to just touch upon your broad government experience. So, as a consultant, and I think this is quite interesting because there's probably a lot of consultants tuning in. You're ultimately an outsider with the groups that you're working with. So how do you, and you obviously would come to it with probably more analytics and Power BI experience, obviously, because you're the subject matter expert. How do you go into an environment and advise or help on prioritizing the highest impact pieces of work or the highest impact initiatives? Is that something that you do, or and then if it is, how do you do it? If not, what actually is the process around how you engage in your work?
Well, I'll start off by saying, to an extent, as I've said before, the consultant, and as you said as well, is a little bit of an outsider in many government projects, and a lot of the decisions have already been made on direction before the assignment is granted. So I have less impact on the direction of a project than I'd probably like. One of the things that I feel really strongly that I have a good, what's the word, that I can really bring to a project is the fact that you really need to, you can't have everything being a priority. Like, people are always saying, this is a priority, this is a priority. And it's, well, if everything's a priority, then actually nothing's a priority. So you need to pick one. So
how do you think these internal so how do you get that message across to
it's very challenging
to those who you're working with?
It's very challenging as a consultant and so on. It depends. I think if you're consulting to private organizations, they're really listening to what you're saying a lot more. In government, there's a little bit of 2 classes. I guess there's the employees and then there's the contractors. And I've been in situations where the feedback I get is, don't bother suggesting something because we're going to go with what the employees say.
Mm-hmm.
So
Is
that's
is
a little
there
bit.
is there buy-in within, well, particularly the governments that agencies that you have exposure to? Is there buy-in around analytics initiatives around these Power BI, like Power BI or Tableau, or the tools that are available? Is everyone jumping at the bit to to get access to high quality insights that can be generated?
They certainly are.
Hmm.
And there are a few government departments here in Ottawa that are using Tableau and so on. But one of the strengths that it has, again, is that at least when I was evaluating it 2 years ago, it was a completely on-premises offering. And so the data stayed within the bounds of the organization, which was good for them. There's a lot of interest in Power BI right now. The contracts, I mean, since I kind of switched from general Microsoft BI to Power BI specific contracts, I'm getting people knocking down my door, and my rates have gone way up. So there's lots of interest in it. I was actually, just before we got on today, I was dealing with somebody that wanted me to move to Toronto to do work for them on Power BI. So I mean, this is unsolicited as well. These things just show up. I get one or two every day.
Really?
It's
Wow.
going kind of nuts right now. So, but there is an awful lot of interest, but things move very slowly with the government. One of the challenges, of course, they're having is, unfortunately, with the pandemic, one of the things that's falling off the rails is initiatives to spend money. Because money is having to be redirected by governments. So I'm not really confident things are going to move as fast over the next year as perhaps they would have wanted to. For example, I had a contract to start April 1st on my most recent engagement, and I wasn't actually allowed in the building until May the 6th. And then I was told I had to use their hardware, and I didn't get their hardware until I think May the 27th. So it was probably about 2 months almost after my contract was supposed to start before I could actually get going.
And so, what do you think is driving? What do you think is driving the big uptick in interest in the government space? Is it just that everyone's like executives or managers are seeing these fancy dashboards, or are they what are the triggers you think that are occurring where interest just spikes?
I'm kind of thinking it's the way that the government is communicating with the public. They want to be seen as having very consumable solutions for sharing data. And so on having tables and tables of data and having Statistics Canada dump out databases full of tables is not really useful to people. But if you can produce some high quality, high impact graphics and so on that can be shared with the community, I think that's a thing. The reports that I've been doing probably in the last year have been similar to the challenge entries in that there's few visuals per page, and they're big and they're colorful and they're clear, and they're not really doing very, very in-depth analysis. They're presenting a lot of the information that the government already has, but in a compelling way.
But Power BI specifically is predominantly, like you'd have to say, is predominantly for internal use. And so government obviously has a different requirement where they probably have a lot of external stakeholders. So how is the data being presented through the use of Power BI generally? Like, are you using like a Power BI embedded product, or are you using publish to web, or how are you distributing how are you seeing governments distribute the information to key stakeholders?
Well, at the moment, I'm saying they're not.
Okay.
So, however, that's going to change. One of the things that Canada participates in, and I think a lot of other countries do as well, is Canada has what's called an open data portal, where they actually have their data that's been sanitized and blessed and so on. It's walked around the firewall and it's put out for public consumption. So my take to them says, great, you've already made the data public. Let's put a Power BI on top of that. The data is already public, so who cares? Yeah, we can publish the web. Why not? We're not doing anything to it other than the data. It's already been done to the data that's right there, so why not? So I actually see that as being the way the government's going to get around this, is that they're going to have to adhere to the programs that they have instituted already for sharing data and getting providing Power BI visualizations for their data that's already in the public domain. I'm not seeing a lot of traction on opening up the government's data to the outside world, so I'm not really sure that's going to happen. But I actually see that partners are going to be able to have a better Power BI experience than the employees of government.
Now, one other interesting thing when I look at government, I mean, there's a world of opportunities, as I'm sure you're aware, right? It's there's a lot of sort of legacy things, I presume, that have not been that have not been optimized. But I wonder how when a government sort of decides what to do, that they want to pursue more analytics initiatives, how do you get a cohesive plan or cohesive governance around such a wide scope of possibilities? Do you have any tips around what you're seeing or have been involved in around how, because the government in a lot of cases is probably, you can look at it as like the biggest organization in any country, because it's so massive and so prevalent throughout throughout all industries and etc. So how can people, how can you even think about these things? Like, how can you even think about projects of such big scope and try and get some cohesive governance around it?
I kind of think that you have to take baby steps. You have to start with small groups, start with your champions, find some people that are really interested in it and coach them through in a very simple solution, like going to them and saying, what is your biggest problem? What do you have to do every month that you hate doing because it takes up too much of your time? Let's figure out a way to get Power BI to do that for you. And you can get quick wins for some people, and all of a sudden they start championing it. And they're going, look, I've saved so much time using this. We should roll this out to all our analysts. And then it goes out from there. So having the internal people to drive it. I mean, one of the things that's challenging as a consultant is it's hard for me to push a piece of software or to use a piece of software. However, if I can get somebody else who's an employee very excited about using it and showing them how much they can benefit from it, then things move quite quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good insight. And that's just not government related. That's just any consulting a client relationship, right?
It is to an extent. It's probably colored even more by the experience that I'm having in government. It seems that projects move forward more with the speed that the employees impart to it. So you can have, I mean, I've worked in both private and public spaces. In private space certainly moves a lot faster and decisions can be made based on merit. In government, sometimes a decision, even though it has merit, can't be made for whatever reason. It needs to go, it needs to take a bit longer, or or it can't be made by this group, or whatever, or there's a policy. For example, in Canada, we have a Treasury Board that oversees all of the government departments, and they have standards that have to be adhered to. So I would actually hope that I haven't had the opportunity to work for them in the last 6 or 7 years. I'm hoping that they'll actually be leading a government initiative on Power BI soon, because everybody will be able to follow quite quickly with them. I'm with Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada right now, and they are one of the first departments to really start hiring people just to do Power BI. So I see that as moving forward. It's moving forward very slowly. From my point of view, I see, for example, the Power BI service would be wonderful for them, but they can't. Their requirements are such that they can't share their data at this point. So it's a thing. But at the same time, you just need to do what you can and have the best impact you can with the people that are available to you. One of the things that I'm hoping to do is use my position here to lead demonstrations for other government departments. And the group that I'm in will hopefully be a leader that will be able to entice other departments to move into Power BI and to be a resource for them, for sort of a distributed center of excellence, if you will. But I don't have a whole lot of insight into how that might come to pass. I know there's an awful lot of rules about who can talk to who in the government. So all we can do is wait and see on that. So it's a bit of a pipe dream of mine at the moment, but we'll see what happens. I'm optimistic. There's certainly a lot of interest in analytics.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, it just highlights the employment opportunities around analytics are so diverse, and if you can bring some expertise in a certain area and then add some analytics flavor to it, you can add some serious value. And I get a similar vibe from most of the guests that I talk to. Now, Greg, I want to divert just a little bit and talk more to yourself. I want to talk more about your philosophy around developing analytical solutions. Now, I know you primarily use Power BI, but it could be, we're just talking in sort of more general terms. Like, how do you go about building solutions that are going to make an impact? And obviously, I've seen a lot of your submissions in the Power BI challenges that we run at Enterprise DNA, and you have a unique style. So I really want to dive into that and just sort of talk through it a little bit more. So if you could maybe just run through, how you approach things and a bit more about your philosophy, I think that would be great.
Sure. One of the things, I guess, that's the biggest driver for me is that I'm not writing for the computer, and I'm not writing for myself right now. I'm writing for myself in 6 months, or I'm writing for whoever's going to be extending my work in 6 months.
So continuity is a word that sort of springs to mind.
Yeah, it's the fact. I mean, in the best case scenario, you design something that works extremely well, and you can issue it and publish it, and it works. But chances are, in 6 months, somebody's going to come back and have a tweak to it. So either you or somebody else is going to have to be able to dive into your solution, to read it, to understand it, and be able to modify it without breaking anything. So that's kind of the focus that I take. One of the things that I found at Enterprise DNA and the way that you had presented all of your teachings was the focus on a very clear model, very good naming, and so on. All these things I see is extremely important. They give people a common way of coming into a new project, and they can look and they can see, okay, I know that all the tables that I'm interested in for my stuff is underneath the data model group. My measures are all in the measures group. And so I can go in and I know that everything's going to be named properly. Everything that's named with a key in there is meant to be joined to another table, and so on. If it says ID or code or whatever, then it's something else. But if it says key, I know I can use it to join to another table. And I take great effort to make sure that all the keys are named the same, not so that Power BI can use them, which it can, but so that somebody can look at it. They can say, oh, municipality key in this table goes to municipality key in that table. So that's an obvious thing. They don't have to dive in to try and see, is this really the right link? So I guess the model clarity and naming clarity, those are really important to me. I'm trying to remember now. I think it was challenge number 9. I ended up spending far more on that aspect of my development. And I was really under the gun by the time I got to the end, where it's time to do the visualization. So I only got it, I don't know, maybe 10 or 20% of the way through the visualizations part that I wanted to. But I had to get the model right for my own edification first.
Yeah. Well, I like that. I like that. So you and this is incredibly relevant for any consulting slash client engagement, right? Because you've got to set your reports and solutions up in a way, in a best practice way, where someone can take your work and scale it or iterate on it in the future. And so I think that is a good lesson. But like honestly, it's not just that. It's everyone. Like, because even if you're an employee within an organization, others might use your work in the future. You might leave and go somewhere else, and so having that continuity is. And like I have no, I certainly have highlighted this many times in the past myself, because I know how crucial it is. And so it's great to hear you second that with your philosophy around it.
One of my favorite stories, I'll just go back for a little bit. When I was a development manager with ChangePoint, I had, I think, 5 developers working with me, and they were split into 2 groups. The group had to maintain the current project. One group, had to maintain the current project, and the other group was developing the next version of it. Everybody wanted to do the next version of it. And this is where I used to say to people, make sure your code is easy to read. If not, you own it and you're going to be maintaining it forever. And so on. If you want to work on the new stuff, make sure your stuff is really easy to read. And so on, so somebody else can come in and pick it up.
Nice.
That kind of stuck with me. It kind of developed organically, I guess, with my group, but it kind of stuck with me, and I've always tried to offer that to the clients that I've been interacting with, that I always make sure that everything is very easy to read. I'm less interested in optimization and performance. I'm always going to go on the side of readability unless there's a glaring reason not to.
And what is your how do you approach telling a story around your solutions as well? Because whenever I've looked at things you've produced, the key insights always really jump out at me, and it's easy to understand what the main takeaways are. And so I think you have some unique ideas around that, and so I'd like to just go into that for a moment.
Sure. We've spoken a little earlier about trying to answer specific questions. I really try to focus on a small number of questions that can be answered on each page of a report. And it's kind of the number of pages on a report are going to depend on the questions that are going to be answered. I would try, probably if I had to throw a dart, I'd say no more than 5 questions per page.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's possible, break things down into groups that are easily understandable. I know that the pie chart or the donut chart gets a lot of grief from some people, but I actually think it's really, really useful. Pie chart or a donut chart gives somebody at a glance a really easy comparison between 2 or 3 or 4 categories. And that's what they're going to be making their decision on. So I actually think it's really relevant for decision makers. It's not exciting from a reporting point of view. It doesn't scratch the surface of what Power BI can do. But I think ultimately, if you're starting to look at it as from the point of view of the ultimate design user of your report, it probably is imparting the information that you want really quickly.
Mm-hmm. I certainly get the vibe that you've got to keep it simple approach.
Yeah, very much. And I think it was in Challenge 8. We had I think 5 different priority levels. I produced groupings just to put them into 3. I think we had 11 different status levels. I put them into groups so that we could see 3. So you could see low, medium, high for each one, or P1, P2, P3. That's it. And not go any deeper than that, because I was trying to focus on thinking as an executive using this report, what am I interested in? I want to know what my high priority tasks are. I don't care if there's 19 levels to it. I only want to know the top one. So that's kind of, I guess, extending the simple approach as much as you can. Mm-hmm. And taking that to the extent as well. One of the things that I'm doing all the time now is I'm stamping a version number and a version date and a report ID on every report, just so that when questions come up and somebody said, oh, that donut chart in that report, it's not right. So what's the report ID? What version are you using? And so on. Maybe they're looking at something that's 2 months old, that's been totally redone. But if especially in government, you can get files flying around from one person to the next, and so on. They're not embracing the service yet, in my experience. So we can't always be sure exactly which version somebody's actually looking at. So my takeaway is just throw the version number and the report ID on everyone, on every page, and that way you can always ask them. They send me a screenshot of the whole thing and show me where the error is. And you get the screenshot and it's an old version. You say, yeah, well, use the new version and see if it's still an issue.
Yeah, I like some of your approaches there. I also like how, I do like the keep it simple approach, right, that you utilize. And also, I think what is a nice framework for others if they are looking to develop their analytical capabilities is start off by working out what questions your stakeholders want answered. Like, just think of, try and maybe list down the top 3 to 5 questions that your stakeholders will want to see. And that will drive, I think, the analysis that you do, but also the creative design that you implement in your report. So to me, I think that's a simple and effective framework that you've just talked us through. So I think that there's a lot of impact that can be made in by applying that.
Yeah, I think back to I'm trying to remember now. I guess it was about 2011 or so on. I was consulting with Export Development Canada, and we had a big project that was going on, and people were trying to itemize everything that could ever be wanted from the solution. And then the mobile revolution happened, and all of a sudden, in a year, everybody was interacting with things on phones instead of on computers. So a lot of the work that had gone into trying to prioritize things went right out the window. So I kind of took that experience and said, well, there's no point in me crystal ball gazing about what might be needed 2 years down the road. Chances are the business environment is going to change anyway. So I'll do what, as you said, is I'll concentrate on 3 or 4 things. We'll do that. We'll get the minimum viable product out. We'll start using it, and people will make adjustments as they go. They'll say, you know what, we need it to be red instead of blue. We need it to be green now because the business has changed or whatever. Terrific. That's wonderful. But there's no reason for me to expect somebody's got their crystal ball. They could get all of those requirements right on day one. I mean, so the same way they can't expect me to develop everything perfectly, I can't expect them to be able to enunciate every question perfectly. So it's all like using guardrails. You're moving in the right direction, but you bounce off one side of one guardrail, you bounce off and go on to the other guardrail and you bounce off, but you're still headed in the right direction.
That's great. Now, I want to finish off with a couple of broader questions just to get your perspective on it. What are some other unique things about working with Power BI or working in the analytics space within government that we haven't really touched upon so much already?
I think the data challenge we were speaking of is going to be a big thing. There is certainly an appetite not an appetite in the government. There is a requirement in government at this point that data be released on some sort of a schedule, be it monthly or quarterly or annually or whatever. The use of analytics for real-time information with the government or daily information with the government, I don't think is going to be a thing. I see monthly data drops happening outside the firewall, and then analytics being built on top of those for various partners for the public to consume at their leisure. So I don't see that doing incremental refresh is going to be a thing at all. I don't see having the most up-to-date report being a thing at all. I see them doing like a once a month publishing of reports, and that's it. Which kind of defeats the purpose of analytics, but it is what it is. I'm hoping as well there's a parallel effort inside the government where they can be using the analytics tools to see the day-to-day information, and they can figure out better ways of doing their business, or figure out better ways that they'd like to be able to present the information to the public. So I see kind of 2 tacks, I guess, and I'm not sure. I think that the public one is probably the most interesting. So I think it's going to vastly improve the public's opinion of what government can do for them. I mean, the data is out there, but there's only a handful of people that are going to spend the time to consume an entire data set and dive into developing insights from it. And they're probably coming in with a pretty specific purpose, whereas the people in government probably have a better idea of what they'd like to be sharing, and they can produce graphics that people don't even realize that they really, really want. But as soon as they see them, they'll go, that's exactly what I want.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, there's some good takeaways there. Final question for you, Greg. What are you most excited about in the analytics space, in the near future? And also maybe what you're excited about with Power BI, where Power BI is evolving to.
Well, the thing that excites me the most is also something that I don't think is going to happen at all, and that's certified and promoted endorsed data sets, the reusing of endorsed data sets. I see it as a huge thing. Like I'm spending probably 3/4 of my time involved in helping enunciate exactly what data to use, trying to get people to enunciate exactly the business rules that are being used to transform data. And that effort isn't being as widely used as I would hope. So kind of in my ultimate scenario for the government, I would see them using the Power BI service. I would see them promoting and certifying data sets and saying this is the gold data set for ABC, and then letting the analysts that are in the government go wild with using those certified data sets, produce
Is that a general trend? Is this certified data sets? Is that like a general analytics trend, like that, say, like a corporate could use or a private organization could utilize?
Absolutely, I totally think so. I think everybody should be doing it. I've heard so many different acronyms or descriptions or whatever, but a single source of truth probably is the thing that sums it up the best. Single source means there is only one source, and this is the truth, and everything else is not the truth.
Yeah, I think a good term for this is just is optimizing your data pipelines.
Absolutely.
Like that this is becoming more of a thing than it ever has before. Because these tools are going to be so much more widely used, and access to data is going to exponentially increase. So the requirements to access data, making sure that you have really solid data pipelines in place to manage all that access, and to make sure that the data is optimized and is the right version is critically important.
It is very much so. All that being said, there is, I guess, many of the government departments, they're familiar with and used to Excel pivot tables or just tables of data where they can see incredibly detailed numbers. And I'm trying to push to them that when you're using the same data in a Power BI report, you don't really need to see the actual number. If some number is 117,922, I'd like to see 117K on my report, and that's good enough for me to make a decision on. So I don't care whether the number's off by 1 or 2. Really doesn't matter. I'm not planning to export that data from the Power BI report, but what I am interested in is that the numbers and the relations are all right, such that you can make decisions on that data. And I think that's a real challenge for government right now. They're very much used to saying, well, numbers have to be exactly right. In fact, I just went through an effort earlier today where I had 8 different, I'm trying to reproduce a data warehouse, a multi-dimensional data warehouse right now in a Power BI report. And my numbers are off by less than, most of the time they're exactly right. Sometimes they're off by 0.05%. And I think that's probably just due to the way that Power BI does its summarizations versus how the multi-dimensional data warehouse does its calculations. So I don't see it as being something that really needs to be evaluated. I don't see it as something that needs to be perfect. The decision you're going to be making, the visualization you're going to be looking at is going to be the same anyway. So I see that as a challenge for government. I think people have to set aside a little bit, say the data must be exact, say the data needs to be very good. It doesn't need to be exact.
Interesting. Okay, and final thoughts on Power BI. What are you excited about with the Microsoft's ecosystem?
Well, one of the things that I'm still having a little bit of a challenge with is a publish to web, and the fact that it's quite easy to make something public, but you have to make all your data public at the same time. I have no idea what the right solution is. I have no idea how Microsoft would do this, but I can only imagine that it would be a massive, massive win to be able to have data encrypted in such a way that nobody can see it except through the Power BI report that you want. So I haven't seen anything or heard anything that leads me to believe that might happen at some point, but I see that as being a huge win. Because everybody's got a browser, everybody could consume these reports and so on, and it wouldn't matter. But for example, right now I see the government is never going to use publish to web. Never going to use it because they're too afraid that their data is going to be seen by somebody, even though we know it's encrypted and we can tell them up, down, left, right that it's encrypted all the time. They don't have to worry about it, but still they'll say, yeah, well, if it's outside our walls, it's not protected.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought to end on, and I'll just maybe add my thoughts to it before we round off. Is Microsoft, as I think we both agree, have done a pretty incredible job with the Power BI suite in general, and particularly for internal use. But where they haven't quite nailed it is this external use. They've stuffed around with this Power BI embedded product, which is just, I don't even know what it is really now. They've bastardized it so much, changed the pricing plan so many times. It's pretty useless. But then they're also caught between that and the publish to web, and so they are using the publish to web as a way to really promote Power BI, build buzz around Power BI in a really inexpensive way, or basically a free way. But then they don't have a way to productize the ability to share reports securely to external stakeholders or external parties. And I think they're missing something there. And I think they're missing an opportunity which is so enormous. Like you can't even think about you can't even imagine how big it is, because if you just think of Power BI as an analytical engine, I believe it is an incredible just analytical machine. And why couldn't anyone use Power BI as an analytical machine, but then surface those insights in many different ways? It could be through implementing the Q&A on their website. It could be bringing up a few visualizations on a web portal. It could be creating a sign-on application where you sell your analytics to a client base. But Power BI at its core is the analytical machine, the analytical engine, which is driving that. And so to me, the opportunities are just like endless when you think of it like that. And Microsoft haven't quite nailed the pricing plan or the pricing mechanism for them to extract the value out of it just yet. But I think that could be something that will happen in the future. We'll just have to wait and see.
Absolutely. I can add on a little bit to that. One of the recent contracts I had, someone was asking for people with 10 years of Power BI experience. And I'm saying, well, Power BI has only actually been around for 5 years, so you're not going to find anybody. So, but that's kind of a thing. That's some of the mindset that comes with it. So if they can manage to figure out a way to make these tools easy for the public to use, I think it's going to be a huge win.
Yeah,
for them,
and just also ways to, I think, monetize the analytics that can be done. Because there's no reason why an individual like yourself couldn't could create some sort of product, some analytics product, and then be able to sell that in a secure way. Microsoft can take their cut, an individual can take their cut. Like I think there's just this world of opportunity. I know that other analytics tools are sort of more targeting that side of things. But to me, Microsoft has a superior analytics engine in Power BI and DAX formula language, and the query editor, and the report designs, the flexibility you have around the immense, creative designs you can build into your reports. And so I'm hoping that in the future they are able to figure out a way where they're happy with the value extraction, but also they provide the tools
Yes.
and the capabilities for others to monetize their work as well.
I think it would be a huge win. Referencing the conversation that you had last week or the week before with Jared Moore around the solution that they ended up needing to produce to be able to share their information with a variety of customers.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just one example of what you're saying. If there was another model,
that's an interesting example. Yeah, because like Microsoft are making no money out of that, right? They're not actually getting any value out of that when they should be. They should be able to extract the value out of that distribution of the reports. But they obviously need to build some product around that is easier than what they have with this embedded stuff that they're trying to push, which is just a non-starter.
Yeah, I really don't know how they administer ideas.powerbi.com. I know they're very interested in having ideas voted up. And I'm wondering if perhaps they're driven a little bit by the votes that various ideas are getting to help them put together the roadmap, or whether they really are using their own roadmap and cherry picking ideas that they happen to see on ideaspowerbi.com that they can incorporate into their roadmap. So I really don't know. And I think they've done a phenomenal job. I'm not ready to criticize them at all. I'm a huge fan of the work that they've done. As you are describing, I see many opportunities for extension. But at the end of the day, there's only so many people and there's only so much work you can do. And I'm trying to remember back when I was first developing software, trying to decide which priority was the ultimate priority was a big thing. And so that's where we came up with saying, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. You really have to sit down with your people, and someone says, you got to do this. And you say, great, which one of these other 5 things that I'm currently doing do you not want me to do? And they come back and say, well, you have to do all of them. And you say, well, I can't. I'm only one person. You've got to pick one. So which one do I not do? And that kind of gets people to prioritize things. So perhaps, something like that will come up when the report sharing priority becomes more of a priority.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think we'll round off there, Greg. It's been a super conversation. I really loved hearing your insights and perspectives on a number of different things. So yeah, really appreciate your time today on the podcast.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Sam. I appreciate it.
And thanks also for being a big part of the Enterprise DNA community as well. You're adding so much value to everyone and many things that you're doing. So really great to have you as part of our network. Well, I found my happy place when I found your site a little over a year ago. And I have not strayed since. I'm finding everything that I could want there. Oh, that's brilliant. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to contribute to the community. Brilliant. Okay, well let's round this off. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Another great episode of the Analytic Mind podcast. Please subscribe on your favorite listening app, podcast listening app, and also don't forget to leave us some feedback if you have the time. We always read it, and we're always looking to improve what we're doing. So, look forward to hearing from you in due course. Okay, take care, everyone. Have a good one.